my man. How are you, man? I'm here with Rosé from France because I thought I'll celebrate a little.
Dude, that's not a rosé. That's a
Well, it is a rosé, but I had to put ice cubes in it because I just grabbed it out of my wine shelf and it's not at the perfect drinking temperature. So I had to do a boo-boo and put ice cubes in it.
you're putting ice cubes in wine. That's awful.
Well, it was either that or water.
Any good alcohol, you don't put ice cubes in.
I know that. I know that. I had the whole when I was turning 30, people gave me whiskey stones for my birthday thing. I know.
Yeah, you don't do that.
No, but I'm celebrating our 100th episode, part two, I guess, where we pick up questions that people have asked us that we can answer. And I thought last time I just had water because it was like 9 a.m. in the morning, but now it's like 9 p.m. or even 10 p.m. here. So I thought I'd help myself to a glass of rosé.
Very good.
If I start slurring, then it's just the alcohol.
Okay. Uh, at least that's what we'll blame it on. Hey, dude. So we were going over this list and it was fun the other day. So let's wrap that list up. We
Yeah.
asked for questions. We got way too many questions. We can't address them all. So we were selectively going through a few last time. And now what? We'll do a few more and then we'll wrap it up. Wrap up
Yeah,
our
we'll do
100.
a few more. And one thing that I realized in that part one, like on all those serious questions, we gave totally conflicting advice.
Did we?
There was this
Oh.
nice question of what should we be doing? Should I change my topic? As a senior assistant prof, and I said yeah, and you said no. People must be like, okay, great. Whoever doing this, the answer is simple, folks. Whoever you like better, whoever's voice you like better, that's the
Yeah.
advice you should follow.
Yeah. We usually agree. Like we might have different views, but we come around to some sort of compromise, don't we?
I'd say we do. It just every now and then it takes a couple of turns. But on
Yeah.
some things, we do disagree, and I think that's fine as well. I mean, like people have to make up their own mind and eventually whether or not they want to switch
Yeah.
topic. I do think we said the important things, which is, do it if you feel very strongly about it, but keep in mind there's opportunity costs and there's learn costs and it'll take a while, etc. So consider if you're in the right situation. I think that's what we said between the two of us in just in different words.
Yeah. All right. Where are we?
I'll start with a very nice one. This is one from Philip Hukal from Oslo. I like this question. He said, "What is something you have learned over the course of the podcast that made you change your mind about something?" I like that
Huh.
question. I have an answer to that. Do you have an answer to that? Otherwise, I'll take this one.
Why don't you take it?
Well, I certainly changed my mind about institutional theory because of this podcast. You may recall that coming in, I said like I didn't quite like it because I felt it was one of these abstract, so abstract theories that applies to everything and nothing. And I've certainly come around. And then you
Yeah.
and I were actually working on a paper that is sort of connected to institutional theory. So I dug myself in. I actually attended some of your courses on it to learn, and I've read several of the papers, and boy, are they beautiful. The Rowan and Meyer was really an eye opener. Like I can't remember 4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, so I do appreciate that theory. I've never got to become a specialist in it. But yeah, I mean, you definitely changed my mind on that. So I think that's something I'll take away from the podcast. But more generally speaking, I learned a lot of things from the podcast and from these conversations with you and, with some of our guests, that's for sure.
Well, you know why you didn't like institutional theory? This is so here's I'm going to psychoanalyze you right now, Wrecker. You have two. So first of all, and you have the one side of you which is I'm practical. I'm a practical, real world person. I want to be, feet on the ground. I want to do things that matter. You have this idea that you're very practical, right? And that's your self image. But on the other hand, you're also a scholar. And in order to be a scholar, you're curious, you have to have an understanding that we're more than just, solving problems and doing puzzles in the world, that we have to have some sort of cumulative tradition. We have to understand people who've come before us and all of that. And the problem with being the scholar is then you have to appreciate theory. So those are the two sides of you that are kind of in battle. Is that a fair psychoanalysis of you?
I think that's actually pretty good. And I think that's a general tension in which all of us are, aren't we? I mean, like we are on the okay. There's some very practical challenges. There's always going to be new technology emerging. There's always going to be some question on the ground that people have, and of course, all of us will want to be scientists, and we do like the scholarly tradition. I think to me it's a tension, and it pulls me onto one side sometimes more than the other, and I think that's fine because, as you know, I don't think that there's this one way of doing science. I think for a couple of years you can err on the theoretical side, or you can err on the scholarly, and sometimes you can err on the practical side of things, and so let it go wherever that string pulls you a little bit. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
You don't. I know you firmly planted on the scholarly side of things,
Well,
and that's fine,
yeah, well, sure, but yeah, and William James again, if you want
of course.
to, my boy, he had the tough-minded empiricist and the tender-minded idealist, right? Which might be rationalist, right? Which might be those two. Uh, and I see the value in both. And I did work for, more than a decade before I decided to turn to academia. But the way I look at it is uh, I do what I'm interested in. I value both and all sides and everything, but that's not what I do. What I do is I like to play in the realm of ideas more than other realms if I can get away with it. All right, dude. Samir sent us a question. Both of you have participated in and helped build academic communities. Given the strong emphasis on publishing, how should junior scholars approach community building? Should they engage in these activities?
I'm biased by my own experience. I'd say yes, where you should, and build up your own workshop and start, building community, engage in a community, get involved for a couple of reasons. One of them is the very simple, like, look, build a community around your specific narrow research interest, your topic, your method, your domain, whatever else. Like, find like-minded people. You'll find collaborators, you'll find reviewers, you'll find editors, you'll find people that are interested, and you can have very meaningful discussions about your work, especially if you surround yourself with 20 people that are really interested in the same topic. That's a completely different level of feedback that you'll get from one of these large-scale conferences at ICES, where people are in the room that have some vaguety about what you're talking about. So I think that's number one. You just get better feedback if you build a community around yourselves. And second is just a principle that I hold dear is like, just engage, and if you feel strongly about something, do something about it. It's just a principle I want to live by. Like, people whine about all sorts of things. Well, if you don't like something, go up and do something about it. And that in our world of academia, which it's a self-governed world, like we do everything ourselves, we build our own rules. So if you don't like some of them, well, get active and do something about it. Like, this is why I love these doctoral, what are they called, doctoral student networks or corners, and some of these PhD academies that we now have, and the special interest groups, etc., and so forth. They're very valuable to people, and it's all because someone decided to do it, right? And we should all do some of that and get involved in that. Otherwise, we're
Yeah.
just piggybacking on the work of others.
Well, and he says, how should junior scholars approach? So he's asking, how should they approach community building? And should they even engage? So those are two-part questions. And you said yes, they should engage. And I agree that this game is about a community, and you have to lean in and be part of a community. Uh, but the first part, which is how should junior scholars approach community building, is I would probably say they shouldn't build the community unless they have to. They should
Yeah, I'd
join
go with
the
that. Yep.
community that fits, and then maybe build if that community is not in existence at this point. Like, I know we talked to Jacqueline about Sig Green, and
Yep.
I think that was built in the 2010 range. And I suppose if that didn't exist, someone had to create it. But if it was there already, just join it and be a leader and be, so.
You don't have to be a leader from the start. I mean, like, a very simple way in is to find a track, find a workshop, find a special interest group that kind of matches what you're doing, and just offer to volunteer. Like as a reviewer, everyone loves having volunteer
Yeah.
reviewers, right? So that's a very early, easy way in. If you know there's a track somewhere will be desperately looking out for reviews for those conference papers, just put your name up. Like
Yep.
write these people, whoever runs the track at AMS's or whatever else, write them an email saying like, hey, I'm working on the topic. I'd be happy to help out with reviews. You'll be in good standing. And if you do a good job, people will remember that, etc., and so forth. So, and then very quickly, these communities, they all have leadership positions. Someone has to fill. Like they all have, rolling presidents and whatever else they have. So someone always has to step up. There's always roles anyone can take, and these are all volunteer roles. No one gets paid for them. That's always extra work, and people love if other people put their hand up. They really
Yeah.
do. And like the sooner like very soon you notice that people know you and they
Yeah.
appreciate that you're helping with that community, etc. And that puts you in good state. And because, as Nick said, it's a community, it's very social science. Then being in a community, it means engaging, but it also means being a good citizen. I think, right? Being nice, being helpful, being doing good stuff. So it's quite simple. Being a good person.
Yeah, but keep in mind, you at one point you have to deliver. So joining community is not going to make up for doing the hard work of scholarship. At one point you have to write the papers, and so being too much engaged in communities, uh, you got to know your limits. They will require time. So I would say do it, but be a little careful or be a lot careful and make sure, in the end, it's about getting your publications out. That's what matters. So.
Yeah, that's the hard part of the truth. That's certainly
Yeah.
true. All right. Nick, here's a question that's brand neck that's rapid fire for Nick. I wouldn't even know how to answer that, but I'll ask you anyway. So this is from Florian from Cologne. And he writes, how deeply should an early stage PhD engage with ontology, especially if you're trained in quantitative methods but want to do qualitative work? Do you have a quick answer to that?
Yeah, that's the easiest question in the world. And the nice thing is, if you're a pragmatist, if you're an American pragmatist, you don't have to worry about ontology ever,
I knew you would say
right?
that.
Because what is ontology? Ontology is like religion. Now I know some people, particularly in Europe, are trained to first I have to say my ontology, then I have to say my epistemology, and then I can continue on to my research findings. Uh, that you know, you don't need to do all of that. Now, if you want to, go ahead. If you want to, it's like saying you're a religion. I'm Catholic, and start the conversation saying you're Catholic. That's fine. You've just now said your religious beliefs, but now get to the point. And in the end, you're still going to have to convince people who are not Catholic that what you're saying has some legitimacy. You'll have to be able to talk to that Jewish person and be like, okay, but my finding is this, and it has some bearing. So. So whenever you hear the word ontology, assuming you're not thinking like ontology in the computer science term, which is the lexicon for your ontology in the philosophical sense, uh, you do not have to engage with it any more than you engage with religion in your conversations. And here's the issue. If, whether it's quant or qualitative, you take a fallibilist, humble view of your research to simply say, look, here is my modest argument. Here is my modest empirical findings, and here is my interpretation of this contribution. And I'm not claiming to be the end on everything, but I'm claiming one small contribution. If we took that humble approach, then none of us would have to worry about ontology. The only people who have to worry about ontology are these grand theorists or something, and we don't have to worry about them. So, answer: you don't have to deal with ontology at all. Just do the good work. Now, on a side note, you're trained in quant methods, but you still want to do qualitative work. Uh, Keep in mind, qualitative work. A lot of times, quantitative people look at it and think, "Wow, that's easy. You just write up a case and do it." Well, keep in mind there is no shortcut. No matter what you're trained in, the other stuff might look easier. It might look more fun. It's hard too. All
Yeah.
this research is hard no matter what you do. So just keep that in mind that just because you want to do a little qualitative, you can't just dabble in it. You have to understand how to do it. So,
Nice answer. I follow you on that one.
all right. All right. Let me give you one. This is Teresa Brockelman. So you might know her.
I
Uh,
do.
yeah. So if you would start anew, Wrecker, as a
Hmm.
young scholar, would you aim to focus on one research topic, uh, a certain technology, AI, a theoretical lens, such as institutional theory, or go broad to show expertise in diverse areas? What would you do? A topic, a lens, or
Yeah,
diverse?
topic, lens, or broad. I know we slightly have different opinions on this. I think the one thing we would both agree on is like don't go broad. Full stop. Yeah, so I don't think that's a good strategy because then you're everywhere and nowhere. You need to develop a profile, as I say, you need to develop expertise in a particular area. That, as we discussed some other time, that can easily take 10 years until you really know something and become an expert in something, right? The rule of thumb of 10 years. So then the question becomes, okay, what are you becoming an expert in? And I would think you can become an expert in a theory, like make theory your point of departure for everything. Or I think you can also be an expert in a particular domain. You are the healthcare IT person. You're the digital sports guy. And some people even do this with method. I'm the computational, whatever, sequence analysis person. So to me, these are all three valid choices. I think the method expertise is a little bit more difficult or problematic because very often then you're the method person who ends up applying it to all sorts of things. And then you go broad.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit more problematic to establish yourself as a method expert. That's going to take a long time. I like the idea of taking a niche, and I guess you're saying take a theoretical lens. But I think that's
Well,
just different preferences.
well, I think you're right, first off, that yes, these are all paths to successful career. However, if your goal is to have really impactful, so I'm just going to put an asterisk next to everything you said because I agree with everything you said. But if your idea is to have a lot of citations in top tier publications that stand the test of time, your best bet is theory. Understand a theoretical argument, be able to extend it. If, however, you're very fast and you can do clickbait research and you can be the first to get various things out and you don't necessarily want to go top tier publications, you just want to do rapidly get them out, well then research topic. If research topic is harder to do at the level that'll get you into elite publications. I think being very strong in theory helps with those elite publications.
All right, Nick. Next question. This one is I don't know. Did you mark questions for yourself? Anyway, here's one by
Uh,
Lars. I know Lars. Lars is from Sweden. He's a philosophical guy, so he might have a different stance on that ontology question. And he's asking, how can we sense something that is immaterial or non-material? And he puts that in quotation marks. All of our knowledge is ultimately achieved through our sense organs, sensing the physical material energy from the environment. Thus, the entire discussion of immateriality in relation to digital transformation is based on a chimera. Certainly not the only one making this argument, that's for sure. What's your view on that?
well, a funny side story is we have a paper in JAIS where we, with Urigal and Frederick Chasin and everything, where they kind of had us go that material immaterial route. And frankly, all right, so this is the answer. And it wasn't the way we set up the paper at first. We just followed the reviewers and we went that way. Now, is it because I believe in the immaterial, non-material, whatever? But look at this question. He's asking, Lars is asking an ontological question. He's saying, what do you
Yes.
believe, right? And about materiality and immateriality. And the American pragmatist would look at this and say, well, of course, just define it.
Yeah,
Define
exactly.
material one way,
My
define
answer would have been,
immaterial
well, it
the
depends
other.
on how you define it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's fine. So this is the famous, William James, he said the philosophers were talking about the squirrel in the tree. And they said, if you go around the tree, the squirrel stays on the other side of the tree. So you can go all the way around the tree, but the squirrel will go all the way around the tree as well. So the question is, did you ever go around the squirrel?
Like philosophers think the most stupid questions.
What?
Since you go around this
Yeah.
it's like
So so
how many fairies can you put on the pin? That's the same kind of
the
question.
same argument. And what he said is, well, it depends what you mean by around. And if by around you mean do you go behind the squirrel's back? Then no, clearly you didn't go around the squirrel. If by around means you went north, south, east, and west of the squirrel, then yes, you went around the squirrel. So that's like this whole material, immaterial, non-material debate, right? If we define the terms in a particular way that's useful for us for making our argument, which we did in our paper, we started with tangible and abstract, and we ended up with material and non-material, simply following that paper. It was what was it, Fike? And I forget which paper I'll let you.
Was
It'll
it?
be
He's
in the
not
show
Fike.
notes.
What was
Yeah.
it here? Polionari in First Monday. The material in it
No,
matters or
no, it wasn't
material
that
made
one.
made of matter. He's
No,
on Fike.
no.
The
Yeah.
affordances for institutional
Yeah.
transformation or something. That one.
Nah, that might
Yeah.
not be it. I'll let you know what the we can put it in our show notes which paper we ended up following. But yeah, the question is how do you define it, and then what's your argument? Whether you use those terms or not are kind of irrelevant, right?
Yeah, I do
So
a little bit of a shout out to my postdoc, Lucas. Lucas from he actually came from Copenhagen and he wrote a nice paper with Philip and Zhao Zhao, and they have I think a very nice distinction between the material, immaterial, and physical digital, which I think is quite useful. Anyway,
yeah.
but
Wait, it was
ultimately,
Faulkner and Runde.
oh, that
So
one, yeah,
Faulkner
yeah.
and Runde is that's the
Okay, so that's a different one. Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, it's all a matter of definition. I think I would agree with Lars a little bit in the we're sometimes taking these tubes very loosely. And I think what
yeah.
sometimes people mean is like, hey, look, there's stuff that is, digital bits and bytes flowing through the internet. And then there's, of course, sort of hardware things. And maybe they matter more than we sometimes give them attention to. That is a thing that I've been interested in as well for the last couple of years, like some physical aspects of digital anything.
Yeah.
But, but ultimately, whether or not we call it material or immaterial or whatever else, it's really just a matter of what that word means to you.
Yeah. All right, I've got a question for you here, and this is from Monadipa. I thought this
All
was an
right.
interesting one. How can I avoid falling into the trap of advice that sounds lofty, like
Mm.
from senior scholars at doctoral consortiums or on social media, but I don't know if they practice it and have tested it, right? And this is a
Yeah.
lot of like how much of the stuff that we say
Yeah, I
do
know.
we not actually do, Wrecker? Like we say how it should be, and then we might not always do it that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a couple of issues here. I mean, one of them is this very famous survivor bias. Like, I'm giving advice that is based on what I did, So, like, hey, look, I switched topics, so switching topic is fine.
Yeah.
It may not be. It just happened to be one of the things that, for some reason, worked for me, and you don't really know because you don't have the alternative. Anyway, so that's certainly happening.
Well, and I'll tell you what, during my PhD, I would ask people for career advice, and I've seen people do this. Like the generation ahead of us, none of them planned their careers. They just kind of did good
Well,
work
I
and they
didn't
got,
do either. Like, did you
well,
plan your
yeah,
career?
of course I did.
What? No, I didn't do that.
Yeah, I said I'm only going to go to an R1 in the United States or I'm going back to industry. And I knew that
You said that.
publication,
That was your
yes.
plan? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. I
when
would like very
during my
different to
PhD.
me. Okay. No.
But yeah, and yeah, I focused on particular journals. I did particular things. I was really focused. But if you talk to some of the senior folks, they're like, "Oh, just do good your work, and life will be just." No, that's in their day. That worked for them in the 1980s and 90s. That doesn't work right now to get, at least in the US, to get,
Okay, let's
research skills.
deconstruct this a little bit because I think you're right. So one of the things that people need to check for is, I guess, what timeliness or from what era is this advice from? I think
Yeah,
that's a very good advice. Like if that is something that worked for someone in the 90s, well, the 90s was a very different ball game. Yeah,
yeah,
on all sorts of levels. So I think that is a very good check. The check that I would
yeah,
always recommend is like, all right, who said that?
yeah,
Like, what do we know about the person that gave this whatever piece of advice? And
yeah,
and like, what's the standing? Like, what do we know of that person? Because let's be very honest, there's a lot of senior scholars and people on panels, etc., that they're more or less scholarly and they're more or less ethical. That also happens and more or less.
hmm
So I'd always ask. I sometimes ask when people come up like, oh, I got this and this advice. I usually ask, okay, who said that? And
yeah,
then try to kind of mix it a little bit with knowledge about the person, to
yeah.
to sort of evaluate how good that advice really is.
And keep in mind that we are a field of, I guess we're kind of all narcissistic a little bit, right? We're a little bit self-centered, and the reason is we have to be. We have to be a little bit ego driven, I think, because we are getting a lot of negative feedback constantly.
Yeah,
Every
fair
single
enough.
paper, everything we do, we get negative feedback. We get more rejections than we get acceptances. The only people who can do this are the people who have a pretty high opinion of themselves. And there are two types of these egomaniacs in academia. The first is, I'd say, probably like you and me. where we're egomaniacs, but we're tolerable. And it's like we're pleasant enough so that it hides our
It,
ego
it hides the
issues.
egomaniac, yeah, that we are.
And then there are the intolerable egomaniacs that every conversation starts with I, and you can get in a
Yeah.
discussion with them, and it's always stories about themselves, and they have a particular way of working with other people where they'll take a lot of credit. They'll, whereas with you, when you work with the student, you talk about what the student did and everything, and you realize that, yeah, you might have helped and guided, but they did all the work. The other type of egomaniacal scholar is going to take all the credit. I think if you find yourself talking to that type of person, maybe discount everything they said because it's all going to be about them and their accomplishments. And I have a feeling a lot more of it had to do with luck. It had to do with other people. It had to do with a whole bunch of factors that I'm sure include them. It's hard to be successful without some care, but they're going to overestimate their ability to do things, I guess.
There's the third type of person. That's the person that doesn't actually stand up on these panels and doesn't take the stage, etc. And that's just way too humble to actually do that. And these people do exist as well. And these are the people you want to seek out and get some advice. Probably not on stage, but over a quiet coffee over your paper, which they, by the way, they would have read. They marked it up with comments. They come prepared to the meeting. These people do exist as well. Like,
Does
I'm
that
thinking
person
about.
exist?
Well, these the Ron Webbers of this world, they are like that. He's
Yeah,
not
but
gonna
he's
be on
on
a
panels.
panel.
So I was thinking, is Moody, the moment you said like humble and authentic, I was thinking Andrew Burton Jones. I was thinking Dequebe Maruping, right? These are guys who are really soft spoken. They're brilliant, but they don't put themselves out there, right? And they're
Yeah,
really generous in spirit. But they're on every panel out there. The world discovers them quickly and puts them
they
out
are
there.
on more panels than they used to be, but it's
Yeah,
hard to say no all the time, I guess. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but
yeah,
I just wanted to make the point that there are these people that whose
yeah.
advice you can safely listen to because it's not about themselves, and they don't put themselves on the stage to be a megaphone, but they will give you an answer if they're asked.
Even those guys, they gotta have. They might be quiet and soft spoken, but they have to have a little bit of an ego, right? They've
Well, we all have an ego. This is a very egocentric profession that we're in, and
yeah,
we all said a couple of times this is a status game. It
yeah.
is. So you got to play for that. It is true, right? And like I sometimes like the weird thing also is like even for your university or your school or anything like that, the better you do for yourselves, everybody else wins too, right? So
Yeah.
really, you got to focus on yourself because by trickling down, this will be good for everybody else too. Even
Yep.
if you're successful, it's good for your students, it's good for your school, it's good for your dean, it's good for your university. Everybody wins if you
Yeah.
are becoming an egocentric maniac. It's a
Yeah,
really weird
exactly.
profession. It is true in a way. All right, let's go. Let's move on. That was a good question.
All right.
My
All
turn.
right.
Okay. All right. Moni Deepa, another nice question. I do not feel comfortable humble bragging about professional matters on social media. How will that negatively affect my career?
Well, I would say it doesn't at all. I mean, look at the people I just mentioned. Look at DeQuebe and Andrew. How much are they humble bragging on social media? They're not at all, and they're at the top
Yeah.
of our profession. I think you and I have talked about it in the past, and it seems like if you do humble brag a little, or talk about your papers, and you have a particular way of doing it, then it's okay. It might get exposure for your stuff a little more, but yeah, it's not necessary. But what is it? Remember rules for bragging about your publications?
Well, first of all, don't brag.
Yeah,
Second, don't start with, I'm so thankful and grateful for everybody else and for publishing this high quality outlet. Blah 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 blah. 12 lines. You haven't even given me the title of the paper yet, let
yeah,
alone the content. So so like if you want to announce a paper, you say like this is a paper. This is what it's about. This is why it matters. You don't even have to put the outlet there. You certainly don't use the word humble. There's lots of rules, but I think I fully agree with you. I think, first of all, I think the days of social media and LinkedIn, they're slowly but surely over again, right? So because we have seen so many negative examples of humble bragging and everything else, that everybody seriously turns away from these platforms that got perverted. Even LinkedIn got perverted now. X has gotten perverted a long time ago. So I think it's just slowly declining. And secondly, you're absolutely right. Like everyone knows good scholarship. And we all know who these people are. And these people that we're talking about, they're not on social media. So I don't think it matters at all. It may
Yeah,
matter a little bit in the short run, in that, people will find you, will find your work, etc. But I think we're overestimating the impact that actually has on other scholars.
agreed.
Yeah.
All right. So Steffi asks us a whole bunch of questions trying to get the inside scoop on the podcast. Like, what did we cut? What are, but here,
Mm.
there are a couple of questions she had. One was there ever recording fail that listeners never got to hear about? Uh, did you,
Yes.
and I'll give you a story on that one. And then here's an episode, and I have an answer on this one too. Did you ever release an episode thinking this is going to stir up some trouble? So either of those. Do we have a fail or
Well, we have a few episodes that never got aired.
Mhm.
And because we do the right thing, so like we take it, all of these are episodes with guests actually, and so and then we record it and we run our mouth as we do with our guests, and then we ask them if they're okay with us publishing that, and then once or twice we had situations where people said like, what, I don't feel too comfortable, and we said that's fine, and just never aired it. That's it.
Yeah,
End of story, right? So this does
yeah.
happen. It happens rarely, but it happened once or twice, and I think that's fine.
We did a podcast with someone, and I guess we told a personal story, and that
Yeah.
guest didn't like the personal story. But remember, we did an entire podcast with those guys on that other pod, and we
Oh,
talked for an
yes.
hour, and
Oh,
nobody
that's right. I
recorded.
forgot. I forgot. Yeah, I forgot that. We did a crossover episode with these PhD students that ran their own podcast out of Vienna or somewhere, like somewhere in
Yeah.
Austria. And they said, we can go to the recording, except that they didn't.
No one recorded. Yeah, but then we ended up redoing it. There was another one we did a fail on. We were at ISIS in Texas, and
Oh,
you weren't
that's
there,
right.
but you were zooming
Yes.
in, and I had a room filled with, I don't know, 100, over 100 people, and
Yep.
we were going to do a live podcast, but we
And
couldn't get things
you
going.
even brought beers because we wanted to throw out cans of beers for really good questions, and you brought them and you checked them out in the
Yeah,
room. But
I know.
the infrastructure was so bad that I was there, but everything had a delay on it, and I couldn't hear what anyone was saying. No one could hear me. So we did it. It was a live episode, but the recording was just too bad to put it out. So that's
Yeah.
it. So it
So,
happened, but there's no recording of it.
so I didn't tell you about this. Are you going to be at Academy of Management this year? You'll be there,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So Attila from CBS, Attila Martin. Yeah, he said that he'll set us up with a studio out there at
Oh,
CBS to do a
nice.
live podcast. So we should do
Really?
something fun
That's
when we're out
we'll
there.
do it. We'll do a live show recording at AOM. I like that. Yeah,
All
that's
right.
good.
That'll be our first episode for next season.
Wonderful. That's a very good idea. The other ones were like they were 2021 or something, a long time ago. AMSIS was still virtual, I think. We did one virtual recording at AMSIS that got aired. And then the
Hmm.
other one, I think, was ISIS 2021, where COVID hit again and I couldn't make it. I had to cancel the travel plans, but I had anyway. So a long time ago. So yeah, time for another live show. Absolutely.
So did you ever say this one is going to stir up some trouble? I'll tell you what I thought might stir up trouble is, and I'm going, and hopefully you're not annoyed with this, but we actually recorded a little podcast talking about that generative AI paper.
Yes.
Remember that
Yes.
in
That's the one that
iGen?
I was thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, right when it came out, it had all the luminaries of our field, and you and I were basically criticizing it. We thought we sounded, and we sent it to a couple of our friends, Young Jin and Brian, I guess, and
Yeah.
they looked at it and said, "Guys, you sound really mean spirited and nasty. And what are you
Yeah.
doing? Just let the people exist." And we're like, "All right," so we just deleted that one. And then here a few months ago, I think we mentioned it in a podcast, that paper, that generative AI paper, and what a horrible paper it was.
We still
Uh,
called it out as bullshit.
yeah, but we just did it quickly in the scope of doing another.
Yeah.
We were talking about other stuff, and we put it out there. Never heard a
And
peep.
no one
No one
noticed.
cares.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I
that
thought
was
that
kind of
someone would say something. Yeah, absolutely. But no one did. Yep.
yeah.
So that's the one that I thought about as well. And I think like I like the fact that we asked some friends about it because of some level we felt squeezy about it. And also like the feedback we got. They basically said, look, it's good. It would be good to have some positivity and
Yeah.
not negative criticism. And I think they were right. And there's a time for criticism, but it's always got to be constructive. And maybe we're a little bit destructive. So the reality is, I don't like the paper. You don't like the paper, and I think that's fair to say. But there's no point in actually dedicating an
Yeah.
episode to it.
Yeah. All right, my brother. What else? Are we wrapping up or should we do one more or so?
We'll do one or two more. Wait, I got
All
one here. This is a
right.
nice
All right.
one from Anuragini from INP in Paris, France. Um, how has this podcast helped you grow as an academic? Do you have an answer to that? I have
Uh,
one. I can start if you want.
Go ahead.
The one that it read really like very operationally day to day helps me a lot. We talk a lot about how to be an editor on this podcast. We have countless discussions on this podcast. And that, like, I try to live up to that. I think that's the first thing to say, like, because I think like some of the principles about how we should be strong editors and fast and reactive and help authors and do this and do that, etc. I really try to do that. When I write letters, I am thinking about stuff we discussed on the podcast. So I'm not sure
Yeah.
about the academic and whether that makes me a better method person or better steeped in that theory, this theory. But I certainly do think it helps me be the editor I want to be. I'm not saying this is the best editor or anything, but I do think it helps me be a good editor. And, very proud to say, like, I got some really nice emails over the last couple of weeks for papers that I was very happy to accept eventually. And I got some nice emails. And of course, they're all happy. Everyone's happy. But, I was like, yeah, this is nice. And makes you, don't you feel proud about a paper when you are the editor, even though it's not
Yeah.
yours? But it's a
Yeah.
very nice feeling. And I do think of the podcast a lot when I'm doing editor work.
Yeah. No, that I like that. I don't know. I have to think about this, but I'm going to move on. I'm going to ask you a question.
All
Here's
right.
a question for you. What's up with the ads? So, so there are ads in the podcast now,
There
Record.
are
What's
now ads
happening
on the
with those?
podcast. Yeah, so apparently there's some sort of threshold of listenerships or followers. I don't even know, like, or people that click or something. And once you hit a certain threshold, you qualify for ads programs, and then you
Yeah.
start making money. And people, it's amazing how much money that is. Now, anyway, but yeah, so that's just really what's happening. The podcast audience is still growing, which I find amazing. It's not exponential, of course. This is not Wecash or anything, but it's been growing steadily and substantially every year and every episode in a way. And for some reason, the podcasting platforms are like, hey, look, you should play some ads, and we place one in the beginning and one in the middle, and that's about it. And
All right.
then we'll see how that goes. That's it. We can always turn it off at some stage. But I thought,
So,
oh, let's have a look.
so you've been bankrolling our podcast since the beginning.
That's
Out of your
true.
pocket, you have been
Absolutely.
funding all of this, and now we have ads. So how much money are you making with the ads? Are you
I
making
don't
like
know yet because it's only been going for a month and they have like a 90-day something. Like, so I haven't even seen stats yet. So it'll
oh,
take a couple of months. So by the time the next season, like in August, by the time we should get some stats, because it only started in April or something. So I don't know. Like
so
if I call you up and say like we have a text problem,
yeah.
then we make a lot of money.
If I were to predict, you're going to go like 3 months and make $20 or something like that.
It's probably got to be more than that, Nick.
In which case, it's not worth. But if you end up 3 months from now, you're making like $5,000-6,000, then
Maybe a
then
text
this is
problem.
worth. But that's not going to be. We're not going to have that kind of.
I don't know. I don't know. So put it this way: either I call you up and we have a text problem, or I call you up and I'll take you out to some fancy restaurant in
There you
Denmark.
go.
And they have lots of really good restaurants in Copenhagen. And if that's what it is, I'll take that. Have a
All
nice
right,
dinner.
all right. Here's an easy one. Who would
All
win
right.
in which sports if Wrecker and Nick had an Olympics?
Well, that's just so easy. Like we do basketball 1-on-1,
All
and
right.
you don't
Now
score.
I know how to
It's
answer
like
this.
like not 1 point.
You would win in every single sport
What?
except combat sports. I would probably, especially, I don't know, you probably beat me in boxing too, but I think if it
No.
were like basically wrestling, that's the only sport I would beat you
No, no,
in.
no, that's not quite right. You'd win it all the I don't know where you little know or muscle. We did bench press competitions and
Oh,
you won
like
that handily.
weightlifting. So I
Yeah,
beat
wait,
you
you
in,
won weightlifting. You did,
I'd
which I
beat
didn't
you in
think would
weightlifting
happen,
and
but you
wrestling.
did.
And everything that requires coordination, you would beat me, I think. That's
I'll
what.
just take anything I can take into my hand and throw. I
How
like my
about
chances.
shooting? How
I'm
about
not good at
shooting? Can
shooting.
you
I
shoot
don't
a
know.
gun? All right,
No.
anything that involves shooting a gun. I'm American. We're
Well,
better
that's
than
okay. Then you have like 20 gold medals in, all the different pistols and bows and whatever they shoot with.
yeah, yeah.
And I win in track and field.
All
All
right,
right. All right. Last question. Final one. All right.
Mayor.
Meyer, from
Yeah.
Mayor, yeah, from Ottawa. If anything, what would you like IS scholars to do differently than what we have been doing so far since the 70s or so? Okay, I like that question.
I mean, there are a few things. First
Yeah.
of all, I like our field. I think it's really cool. It started with software development and the IT function, and we're evolving into just a really cool field. I think it's a wonderfully vibrant field. I only wish other people would pay attention to us in other fields because we're doing such cool stuff. But if we could go back to the 70s and change something, the thing I would change is the review process, and I would make it like law. So law has the greatest
Oh.
review process of all the disciplines. What they do is they have like this clearinghouse marketplace thing, and the more prestigious journals wait to go and get the less prestigious journals try and grab your paper. So they all fight for your paper to try and publish it. If we had some sort of marketplace clearinghouse, but right now, the thing that drives me nuts about our field, I don't have time, you don't have time, our students, no one has time. Yet we submit a paper at MIS Quarterly. We have one senior editor, one associate editor, two or three reviewers, all engaging with it. Then it gets rejected. It goes over to ISR. Another 4 or 5 people. It gets rejected, goes over to wherever, JAIS. Another four. By the time the thing gets published in JAIS, it had months and months of 10 people's time. It's a horribly inefficient way to do things. We need to do something to create a marketplace, create reviews, have them out there. And we're a small enough field where we could have done something like
You
that.
know what that reminds me of? Like when the internet came up and eBay came up, were you the same? Like I was bidding on shit. Like I was just buying stuff on eBay and it was
Yep.
so exhilarating, right? And I was
Yeah.
picturing myself like putting my paper out there and waiting for the bidder. It's like, don't touch it too early, don't be too late. It's a little bit like
Yeah.
it's 2002 and you're bidding for some weird thing on
Yeah.
eBay in the very back in the day. And that's what
Oh,
it
you could
feels like.
see stuff behind me that I bought on eBay. Where is it? Oh, you see that little Hydra that's head endy. That's a Hungarian porcelain, and it's a
I
Hydra.
see
It's a
it.
three-headed dragon. I got that on eBay back in the day.
Wow, that's the last thing I bought on eBay, which is a little figure, like an action figure from Legend of Zelda. Is Link.
What? Really? Yeah, that's
I love
cool.
Link and Zelda. I'm a huge nerd when it comes to just the Zelda video game series.
Oh, that's funny.
Uh,
So we have a bunch of little crap dust collectors in our houses that we bought on eBay back in the day. Yeah, I bought a ton of it.
well, the
Yeah.
other thing I still have from eBay are like role-playing games. Like I used to do role-playing when I was a student. Like
Hmm.
Dungeons and Dragons and
Yeah,
stuff. Like
sure.
on a piece of paper with the dice with 20 sides to it and stuff like that. Anyway, so I still have that, like literally over there. So what I would suggest, two things that we could do differently is one of them is easy. Is like I just would have hoped we have a different name, not because I have a problem with IS, but just because no one has an idea what that means. Seriously,
Oh, good point.
right? Like I could go with IT, I can go with socio-technical. Like either of those, like anything like this would be easier to explain to people that have no idea. So tech and business or something. I think something that's very bland and simple would be awesome. I would have liked
Information
that.
technology probably would have been but
Yeah.
I don't know. But that doesn't have the social system implied in it, right?
Yeah,
That
and
it's
the other thing
foundation.
and again, you probably don't like me for saying this, but look, I have no problem with theory, but it's become such an exclusive focus that I just wish we would, some other fields, especially the like the natural sciences, they don't just put theory on the pedestal. You can have a great career as being, I don't know, an experimental physicist or anything like this. No, so
Mm.
I think we would have if we could have a healthier balance between different forms of contributions, I would have liked that. Um, just because I think we are going too much into this one direction.
You say that, but then I look at the journals and I think we do a heck of a lot of stuff. Like if you're doing
Yeah.
social and behavioral stuff, yeah, of course it's going to have a lot of theory, but we have a lot of design science, we have a lot of economic and
Except
economic
that we
theory,
don't have a lot of
political.
it, Nick. I mean, like, yes,
Yeah.
and I think what you said earlier, like, I love our field both for being very open, very pluralistic, like a lot of things and genres and whatever else. You are more than welcome in our field, which is not the same in many other fields.
Right.
I don't have to go very far to my colleagues and talk to them about qualitative work. To finance, to marketing, like that's just a no-go still, right? So we're better than that in that way, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the majority of the field. It really just isn't. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that like develop a less. strong obsession. I don't know whether that's an obsession, but maybe, have a little bit more balanced view on different kinds of contribution and just a name. But other than that,
Yeah.
I will say, like, I agree with you. I think we've done a lot of things right. Um, and I wish that we would be in a better position with our outward appearance to
Yeah.
others. Like
Yeah.
even to this day, like some of the other colleagues from other fields, I always feel like they look down upon us. I don't know whether that's me or whether that's
No.
actually the case, but I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't think they look down upon us. They just don't think about us. I actually think in some ways they think of us the way, non-IT people think about the IT people in an organization, right? And maybe they think
Yeah,
of us as nerds. Maybe they think what we do is really cool and important. They just don't want to have anything to do with it. But what I think whatever other people's mental model is of our field, the sad part is so much of what we've done in the past applies to things around AI and things they're all of a sudden
that is
interested in,
true.
but they're not going to read it, right? So
That is
they're,
true.
they're recreating it. Uh, anyway, all right, my brother. This was it. 100 episodes.
100 episodes, and we will continue for now. We have a whole bunch of guests still lined up for this season, and a couple of more really cool ones for the next one. So for now, we'll continue and then see how it feels and how we go. But yeah,
Yeah.
like on to the next. My glass of wine is empty, so I'll.
You're no longer in any kind of having any
No,
kind of anxiety crisis about I
no, I
should.
don't. But then again, it's spring. It's almost June, so I feel great at this time of the year. Ask me again in November. When the
Right.
darkness comes down and winter is coming. So
All right.
I feel worse at that time. All right, my
All
brother.
right.
Talk to you
All
next
right, man.
time.
See you.